So, when you think of science and religion, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For a lot of us, it's probably this picture of an epic, ongoing battle. Faith versus reason. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? Not even close. So, which one is it really? Are they locked in an endless war? Or is it more of a peaceful truce, where they disagree to stay in their own lanes? Or maybe could it be something way more complex, almost like a secret alliance? To figure that out, we have to start with the story everyone thinks they know. Right. The story most of us grew up with is this idea of constant conflict. We imagine Galileo staring down the church, a battle for the ages. But what if this so-called age-old war isn't really that old at all? Okay, get this. The very ideas of science and religion as totally separate things are pretty new. The concept of science as its own thing, distinct from just the general study of nature, only really came about in the 19th century. And our modern idea of religion as this private, personal belief system, that's a product of the 17th century. Before that, trying to pull them apart would have been like trying to separate the yolk from an egg after you've scrambled it. So yeah, that popular myth of an eternal war, it's just way too simple. The real story is so much richer and, honestly, more interesting. It's a story that has conflict for sure, but it also has moments of total independence, of friendly dialogue, and even times when science and religion were basically one and the same. Let's break down what those four relationships actually look like. To get a grip on all this, historians and philosophers have come up with a really handy framework. They've boiled it down to four main ways that science and religion have interacted over the centuries. And here they are. First, you've got conflict. That's the one we all know, where they're at war. Then there's independence, where they stay out of each other's way. Third is dialogue, where they're actually talking to each other. And finally, integration, where they're deeply connected. Let's dive into the most famous one first. We have to start with conflict. This idea, which scholars call the conflict thesis, got super popular back in the 19th century. And it wasn't an accident. It was a story pushed to help establish science as this new professional authority, completely separate from the church. The core argument is simple. Science and religion are fundamentally enemies, and they always have been. This quote from the biologist Richard Dawkins really sums up the modern conflict view perfectly. The idea is that science is all about evidence and testing, while religion is about faith, and you just can't mix the two. In fact, from this perspective, one actively undermines the other. Now, of course, the poster child for this whole conflict is the Galileo affair. But when you look closer, it gets complicated. In 1616, when the church first weighed in, they were actually siding with the scientific consensus of that time. The real fireworks in 1633 had as much to do with politics and personal insult as anything else. I mean, Galileo literally wrote a book where the character arguing the Pope's position was named Simplicio. Like simpleton. Not a great move. And here's the real kicker. The definitive, slam-dunk proof for Galileo's theory didn't even show up for another 100 years or so. So the main takeaway here, and it's a big one, is that while conflicts like the Galileo story definitely happened, historians now pretty much agree that they're the exception, not the rule. The idea that this is the only story, it just doesn't line up with the historical evidence. Okay, so let's move beyond the feud. What else is there? What happens when science and religion aren't throwing punches? Well, one very popular alternative is the independence model. The famous biologist Stephen Jay Gould had a great name for it: non-overlapping magisteria, or NOMA. Just think of it like this. Science has its turf, the empirical world, the what is and how does it work questions, and religion has its turf, the world of ultimate meaning, morality, the what should we do questions. As long as each one sticks to its own domain, there's no fight. Then you have the dialogue model. And this quote from Carl Sagan just nails it. This model says they aren't just in separate rooms, they can actually have a really productive conversation. Think about it. Scientific discoveries about the sheer scale of the universe can trigger a sense of awe and wonder, which feels deeply spiritual, right? And, coming from the other direction, religion can raise huge ethical questions about things like genetic engineering that science alone can't answer. And finally, we have integration, where science and faith aren't just talking, they're working together. And for huge stretches of history, this was just how things were done. You had the Islamic Golden Age, where scholars were at the forefront of science and math. You had medieval Christian monasteries that were basically the universities of their day. And for guys like Isaac Newton, faith wasn't a roadblock to science, it was the fuel. They believed that by studying the laws of nature, they were actually reading the mind of God.
Okay, so that's the history and the different models. But what about right now? Does this warfare idea actually reflect what scientists today believe? Well, the answer might surprise you.
Back in 1996, a major study asked top-tier American scientists a simple question: do you believe in a personal God? What percentage do you think said yes? Go on, take a guess. The answer? 39%. Now, for a lot of people, that is way higher than they would have expected.
And here's the full breakdown. You see, 39% believe, 45% disbelieve, and another 15% are on the fence. So, while disbelief is the single biggest slice of the pie, it's not even a majority. It's clear the scientific community is not some kind of monolith on this topic.
And it gets even more fascinating when you start looking at different fields. That same study found that 45% of mathematicians said they believed in God. But for biologists, it was around 30%, and for physicists, just 22%. This shows that even within science, there is a huge range of personal beliefs.
So, what does all this tell us? The crucial point is this: that simple, neat story of a universal war between science and religion, it just doesn't fit the facts. It doesn't match the complicated history, and it really doesn't reflect the diverse beliefs of actual scientists, both then and now.
So if it isn't a simple war, what is it? A fragile coexistence? An emerging cooperation? The truth is, the relationship between science and religion isn't some dusty fact we dig up from a history book. It's a living, breathing, ongoing conversation. And the next chapter, well, it's still being written.